This conference will now be recorded.
We'll call the committee meeting to order, and we determine if there is a quorum. And is there any public comment?
Chairman Gill, we have not received any requests for public comment, but I do see that we do have members of the public here joining us today. So if anybody would like to speak during this portion of the committee meeting, please let us know. Seeing and hearing none.
Are there any presentations?
Chairman Gill, we do not have any presentations this morning.
What kind of presentation?
No presentations today.
All right, I guess we'll go on to the next item, action calendar.
Yes, Chairman Gill, we do have 3 items on our action calendar on 5. The first one is 5A, approval of the minutes. We do have 2 sets of minutes here for consideration. We have the October 14th, 2021 special board meeting minutes. We also have October 25th, 2021 regular board meeting minutes.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Chairman, Director Williams, do you have any comment? Or motion?
I would move the minutes.
I concur, and since this is a committee meeting, the minutes are recommended. The approval of the minutes is done, and we forward on to the full board. We'll go on now to item B.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Gill. The next item that we have is your fiscal year 2021 district sponsorship request. As requested by the West Basin Board of Directors, upon request for sponsorships, we do bring these before the F&A committee for ratification here and then, of course, for the full board. During the July 26, 2021, regular board meeting, the board approved district sponsorships and instructed West Basin staff to bring back any requests for potential event sponsorships as needed. The district has received a sponsorship request from the South Bay Cities Council of Governments for the South Bay City Council of Governments 2022 General Assembly. Staff requests that the board consider a sponsorship of this event. You can see within the board memo, which begins on packet page 26, the West Basin Municipal Water District has previously sponsored the General Assembly at the amount of $2,500. Further down within the memo, you can see that there are 4 funding options as far as the sponsorship goes. There's the Golden Circle at $10,000, the patrons at $7,500, benefactors at $5,000, and again, the sponsors at $2,500. And if you turn your within your agenda packet to packet page 29, you can see the breakdown of all of the benefits a sponsor or Golden Circle patrons or benefactors would receive depending on the level of their sponsorships. This does provide a great opportunity for West Basin Municipal Water District. Within the South Bay Cities Council of Governments, you do have the majority of the West Basin service area with the exclusion of 3 municipalities and unincorporated portions in the northern part of our service area. And so with that, staff would recommend that the board consider sponsoring the 2022 South Bay Cities Council of Governments General Assembly to be held Thursday, March 24th, 2022, and determine the level of sponsorship participation. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
What do you think, Harold?
Mr. Chair, I didn't hear the level that the dollar amount.
$2,500.
Yeah, I would support that going forward to the board.
I concur. Any other comments? All right, so we'll send that to the board with a recommendation of $2,500. Okay, item C, December board meeting.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Deere. As mentioned at a previous board meeting, in looking at the December calendar, the December board meeting would actually be scheduled just after the Christmas holiday. And so we brought this item, and for this presentation, we do have our Manager of Administration, Julie Fraser-Matthew.
Good morning, Chairman Deere, members of the committee and board. This item before you this morning is for the board to consider rescheduling the December board meeting, which is currently scheduled for Monday, December the 27th to Wednesday, December 22nd. As reflected on page 33 of your agenda packet, staff has attached a December calendar, which shows all of our committee meetings as well as external meetings, conferences, and events for the month. You'll see that the December board meeting falls before or on the Monday directly after the Christmas holiday and right before the New Year's holiday. Staff has also surveyed other agencies and found that the trend of most organizations, they're holding their board meetings prior to the Christmas holiday. And if the board would consider moving the December 27th board meeting to December 22nd, which is a Wednesday, they would also need to consider moving the Finance and Admin Committee meeting, which is currently scheduled on Wednesday the 22nd, to another possible date. With that, that concludes my report, and I'll read the recommendation to the board. The recommendation is that the board consider rescheduling the regular board meeting scheduled for Monday, December 27, 2021 to Wednesday, December 22nd, 2021 at 1 o'clock. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
I have a question. Do you have a recommendation for the Finance Committee meeting date?
Yes, the recommended date would be Monday, December the 20th at 11:30.
Okay, that should be included in the recommendation, I would think.
Yeah. If it is, I would support that.
Okay,
I also support moving both the board meeting to the 22nd and the Finance Committee meeting to the 20th. Any other
Thank you.
comments? Okay. Thank you very much. Pass that on to the board. We'll go to item 6, information count.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman Deere. Let me first apologize because so I apologize. And for this area, we do have
Lots of interference out there.
Joel, if you could mute one of the phone callers.
If you wouldn't mind, thank you very much.
Okay, now, are you clear? Oops, turn all the sound off. Hello?
Yes, Chairman Deere. Michelle, you're ready to go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Deere and Board of Directors. This is our regular or standard return to the office update oral report. And the only information that I have to add for today is that essentially, as you may have already heard through various news sources, that the federal government has instituted, in most cases, vaccine mandates across the board. That includes the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They have issued an emergency temporary standard, of course, to minimize the risk of COVID-19 transmission in the workplace specifically. The ETS, which stands for Emergency Temporary Standard, establishes binding requirements to protect unvaccinated employees in large employers. Those are employers that employ over 100 or more employees. And so this, again, is to protect them from the risk of contracting COVID-19 in the workplace. Now, while West Basin does not employ 100 or more employees, we are already in large part already in compliance with the emergency temporary standards. So some of the key elements of the standard is to ensure that you have an employer policy on vaccination, which the district does, a determination of employee vaccination status. Again, the district is already in compliance there. Employer support for employee vaccination. And again, the district has provided said support through, various means of allowing employees to get vaccinated and things of that nature. COVID-19 testing for employees who are fully vaccinated and who are not fully vaccinated, I should say rather. And again, our policy specifically states that that is a requirement of the policy. The standard requires that employee notification to employer of a positive COVID-19 test and removal of an individual if they test positive. The district was already in practice of this requirement prior even to the the proof of vaccination policy. Information provided to employees. Again, we ensure that our staff are fully updated and informed of our policies. Reporting COVID-19 cases, fatalities, or hospitalizations. Fortunately enough, the district has not had to report any incidents of these natures to the CDC or to the LA County Public Health Department, but we are more than prepared to do so if there's a need. And then lastly, availability of records. And so again, the district is already in compliance with ensuring that certain records are available if necessary. So as demonstrated based on the requirements of these federal standards, West Basin is already in compliance with OSHA's emergency temporary standards, despite the fact that we do not meet the criteria of a large employer. That concludes my report for today, unless the board has any questions.
I have a question. Refresh my memory, what's the policy on visitors to the board?
So there is no specific policy for visitors other than our COVID-19 protocols, which all visitors are reminded of when they enter our building, because we have signage all throughout the building reminding them that this is a facility where they do have to wear a mask and they do have to social distance if need be, and that they so we're not asking visitors per se if they're vaccinated at this point in time, but I'm sorry, but we are taking their temperature, and the security guard is asking them a series of screening questions if we have visitors to the building.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, no, thank you very much for a good report.
Thank you, Director Deere.
We'll go on to item 6B.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Deere. The next item we have is refunding of our 2012 A refunding revenue bonds. And for this report, we do have Margaret Moja, our Executive Manager of Finance.
Hi, Margaret.
Good morning, directors. I wanted to welcome you here today to hear sort of hopefully a good news story for the district here to take into consideration of our 2012 refunding revenue bonds. As allowed by our policy, we are to look at opportunities for the district to see opportunities to refinance our bonds at a lower cost of borrowing. Now, there are certain circumstances in which we are able to do so. And I'm sorry, let me just first state we're on page 34 of the board packet. There are certain circumstances in which we're able to refinance our bonds, and we are in such a position at this time. We are in a position where our 2012 bonds are currently callable in February 2022, and as such, we are able to do so under a current refunding. As such, we wanted to bring this item before to the board for your consideration, or just to make you aware that we will be bringing forth information in a later time frame to share with you what that potential results could be. Now, based on current market conditions, West Basin is anticipated to achieve about $6 million or 18% of net present value savings. And again, this is as of today's conditions. Certainly, as we price, those numbers may vary. If I take you to the next page of the board package, page 35, I wanted just to share with you a little bit about the schedule. We did establish an underwriting pool back in January 2021, where we established 7 underwriters to participate in that pool. But looking at this particular transaction, we identified that because of the short nature of these particular bonds, which have a final maturity of 2029, we wanted to also extend the opportunity to maybe look at looking for a direct purchase with qualified banks. So we did solicit to our underwriting pool and a number of qualified banks for that opportunity. The district did receive 6 of our 7 underwriters proposals, and we did receive 4 bank proposals. Those analysis was taking place yesterday afternoon with our financial advisor, PFM, to take a look at what is the best option for us to achieve the lowest cost of borrowing. And as a result of that review, we are recommending that Barclays, again, one of our underwriting pool participants, to be the selected participant on this transaction. Now, what this means is that we would then refinance the $31 million of bonds outstanding, and again, for achieved savings. There would not be any sort of new borrowing associated with it. It's strictly just to achieve savings for the district. As far as timing, we are anticipating to bring back documentation to the board in January 2022. And again, at the same time, we would also bring the cost of issuance so that our parties that work with us to get all the documentation in place, to structure that deal, to meet with the rating agency would also be included. And so we would show that those costs be there. It's anticipated to be around $200,000 for those costs, and those would be the intended individuals or firms that would be included in those costs. As far as timing of the transaction, we are looking to do that early part of February with a closing then the following week. Now, as we go along in this dialogue with the selected underwriter firm, there may be a change in structure, there may be a change in timing, but at this time, this is the anticipated schedule that we're looking at. And with that, that takes me to the end of my comments. But again, I just wanted to share with you the potential for us to achieve approximately $6 million in net present value savings, or 18% of our refunded bonds. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That's great. So we're going to save some money there. Any questions?
No, thank you.
I guess not. Thank you, Margaret. Nice job.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to item 6C.
Yes, Chairman Deere. Item number 6C is our fiscal year 2021-2022 first quarter budget to actual results. And for this report, we do have Mary Ann Rexroad, our Manager of Finance.
Good morning, EJ. Thank you. And good morning, Chairman Deere, members of the committee and board. I will be presenting on item 6C this morning. It's your first quarter budget versus actual for the fiscal year 21-22. I want to start off by mentioning that last week at your E&O meeting, you did hear a presentation from Barkev about the impacts to the district from the Hyperion sewage spill. I want just to point out that those numbers he presented will look similar here. However, his presentation was a comparison with a 3-year average. And today I'll be comparing those actual numbers with the budget that was adopted for 21-22. Second item I wanted to point out when we get to the exhibit is that we did make staff had made some projections outside of the budget for the fiscal year. This is unusual for us because it's so early in the fiscal year. However, with our knowledge of the impacts of the Hyperion spill and those costs, we wanted to do our best in trying to estimate what it might look like. We don't know what those numbers are as of yet. Again, it's only been 3 months, but we wanted to at least try to articulate what it could look like to make you aware of that. And of course, we'll continue to monitor those numbers as we go forward with the fiscal year. So with that, if I could ask you to draw your attention to page 39 of the packet. This is the exhibit. with the budget versus actual for the first quarter. So this should look familiar to you, and I'd like to start off by drawing your attention to the very bottom of the page for our net revenues. For the first quarter, we had net revenues of about 3.3 million. This was compared to the budget of 6.7 million. So you'll see we had a negative variance of 3.4 million. I just want to highlight a few items why that is. So if I could draw your attention back up to the top of the page under the operating revenues. I want to start off talking about the recycled water sales because you'll see that's a negative 4.1 million or an unfavorable variance. As you heard me mention earlier about the Hyperion spill and the implication of that spill, we had a reduced amount of recycled water sales. Mostly it was our barrier that was affected. We had a budget of over, 2,700 acre feet. I'm sorry, 2,900 acre feet, and we were only able to provide recycled barrier water to about 228 acre feet. So that was the largest impact on our recycled sales. We did have reduced sales to some of the refineries as well, but we were able to mitigate some of that with some purchased water that we were able to provide and blend with the recycled water available. Now, if I can draw your attention up to the top line there, the imported water sales, you'll see that's a positive variance. And in order for us to meet the county's request for injection into the West Coast barrier, we were purchasing imported water from Metropolitan to inject into the barrier during most of the quarter. In fact, from early July when the upset occurred all the way until the end of September, we had to inject potable water during that period of time, which gave us a favorable variance in this case. However, if I can draw your attention down under your operating expenditures, you'll see that under the imported water purchases is where we have a negative variance. And that's because of those sales that we had to buy from Metropolitan Water District. We did not budget for those sales. So therefore it's showing as a negative variance. The next line below the imported water purchases, your recycled operations. Again, that number probably looks familiar to you, the actual cost. Barkev had gone through that last week. Just want to point out it is a negative variance compared to budget, and that's mostly from the impact of the imported water that we had to purchase not only from MWD, but we had to purchase imported water from the City of El Segundo and Cal Water Service for some of our refinery customers. We also had an increase in our chemical costs and utilities as well in general. So we did try to estimate that number, as I mentioned earlier, to the end of the year, and we do think that we're going to continue having injection of purchased imported water into the barrier, so we look to have even higher unfavorable variances at the end of the year for those two categories. Moving down to our non-operating revenues expense, just want to highlight one item there. If you recall, when we were putting the budget together, we had a pending judgment on the settlement for the standby charge. It has come to a point where we are not going to have those results for this fiscal year. It looks like the actual standby charge revenues will be higher to the tune of what we've had traditionally or historically, about 10 million a year. So that is a positive variance you see there. So all in all, our debt coverage ratio for the first quarter is 1.63 as compared to a budget of 2.27. And with that, I'll just pause to see if there's any questions.
No questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
If I could just add one additional comment, and as Mary had identified, we wanted just to project out for the end of the fiscal year. And while these are estimates, we do think it's important to note what those numbers are. These are numbers that will be reflected in our upcoming preliminary official statement. And so it will show what we anticipated budget to be at a 1.7 and then a projected debt service of a 1.28. As you recall, we are at a legal requirement of 115. So again, we will be closely monitoring so the effects of both the Hyperion and the drought to the district to ensure that we again are able to at least maintain that legal debt covenant and of course try to get closer to what we anticipated within the budget. Again, these are our estimates, but we did try to play out the scenario to ensure that we are providing the most accurate information that we have at the time of our refinancing transaction coming up early part of 2022.
Okay. Let's go on to the next item.
All right, Chairman Deere, and we're lucky enough that Mary Ann Rexroad will have kind of the remainder of our show here, but we'll do them one item at a time. So the very first, item 6D is our quarterly recycled water operating summary. And again, I will throw it over to Mary Ann.
Thank you, EJ. Yes, so each quarter we try to present the operating summary for our recycled water system. Just provides a little bit more detail than what we show you in the budget versus actual, so I'm going to walk you through that. If I could ask you to turn to page 42 of the packet. And again, this is the same revenues that we talked about earlier that we had for our recycling water operations. Again, we had 7.5 million compared to a budget of 11.6 million, almost 11.7 million. And this just provides a breakdown by each type of sale that we had during the quarter. Again, just want to highlight that you can see the West Coast barrier towards the bottom there, where we had a budget of almost 2,900 acre feet and actual sales of 228 acre feet. On the following page, page 43, we give the breakdown of the expenses related to the recycling system. The top part of the page shows you those that are related to the treatment plant itself, and then at the bottom of that chart is the distribution costs. Again, just highlighting that we did have an unfavorable variance, about 890,000. Again, that was contributed to the higher cost of overall utilities, the purchased water, the chemicals, and so that resulted in a negative variance. So I'll just pause there again to see if there's any questions.
It's not. Thank you.
All right, I think we're ready for the next item. We have a quarterly debt and swap report. Again, we have Mary Ann for this report.
Thank you, EJ. So beginning on page 44 through 54 is your quarterly debt and swap report that's required by West Basin that we submit this each quarter for your review. Starting off on page 47, I just have something I'd want to point out. It's actually a very good thing to point out. If you look over on the far right-hand column under September 30th of 2021, that outstanding principal of about 206 million was a decrease from the prior quarter. We made about 5.2 million in principal payments in the month of July, and so that reduced our outstanding principal. And then moving on to, if you don't mind, to page, let's see, what is that? I apologize. If we could move on to the swap report, which begins on page 50. Okay, just want to note something with the swap report here. We have some good news. We have one of our two swaps that reached its termination date. So this particular report will show that swap one last time. And if you scroll down to the following couple pages, I'll just walk you through that very quickly. So this is your combined. This is swap one here. This particular swap has a maturity of 2027, so it'll be around for a little while, at least for right now. And then moving down to swap two, which is 2 pages down. There you go. This is the swap I just mentioned. It reached its termination date, so this is the last time you will see this swap on this report. And that concludes my report on the debt and swap.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann. And we have a final information calendar item, item 6F, our monthly financial report. And again, we have Mary Ann.
Thank you, EJ. All right, so we'll go through this one by one, starting off on page 57 of your packet is your monthly demands for the month of October. You'll see that this is quite a long report here today. It's about 8 pages of demands. And if you scroll down to the very last page of demands, you'll see that we had about 23.5 million of expenditures during the month. I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, at the very bottom, before you get to the total, you'll see our metropolitan water purchases. For this past month, it was about 14.5 million. That was an increase.
And Miriam, real quick, you're referring to page 64 of the board packet.
Yes, thank you, Margaret. Yes, page 64 of the board packet. We had, yes, 23.5 million in expenditures for the month. At that very bottom line there, you'll see the Metropolitan Water District bill. It was about 14.5 million for this past month. This was an increase of about 700,000 from the prior month. You probably asked me, why am I bringing that up? Well, if you compare last month's demands, we had on last month 18.4 million. So it was quite a big increase from the prior month. And the Metropolitan Water bill was just one of the reasons that increase. The other increases we noted were those utilities costs and chemical costs that I mentioned earlier when we were looking at the budget to actual. So those costs did have an impact to us to the tune of about $4.7 million this month. And with that, I can pause here and see if there's any questions.
I have a question on item 86742, the PARS retirement contribution. How many people do we have who are collecting a PARS retirement?
So this covers, you want to take it, Margaret? I see.
Yeah, if you're asking collecting on the PARS, we have 2 individuals that are currently collecting on the PARS plan, but it does represent all of our active directors, and then 1 who is eligible, has not drawn on it, and then 2 that are currently drawing on it.
I see.
And this
Thank you.
amount here is determined by our actuary, and this represents the annual contribution here. Rather than pay it based off of pay, we get a fixed amount and then pay that fixed amount on an annual basis. And so this is the annual amount.
Thank you.
All right, shall I move on?
I apologize. I was going to say that concludes our information calendar.
EJ, we do have the cash and investment report in the sales, fire sale.
I apologize. Go ahead.
All right, okay, thank you. So moving down to page 65 of your packet begins the cash and investment report. This report is as of October 31st, 2021. You'll note that this report does show a decrease from the prior month of about 5.2 million in our cash and investments portfolio. As you heard me mention earlier, we did have higher costs in the prior month, and that did bring our balances down. And so this report, I'll just walk you through it very quick. On the next page, on page, it is page 66, this is the 2 graphs that we show each month. It shows your distribution of your credit quality as well as the maturity distribution of the portfolio. Following page 67 shows all the transactions that happened during the month. I'll just make one highlight. We did have maturity of one of our U.S. Treasury notes. That particular investment was reinvested into another security in the month of November. You'll see that in next month's report. And the following pages, which includes pages 68 through 71, is all the detail of your portfolio.
Oh.
And I'll just pause there to see if there's any questions before we move on. All right, hearing none, let's move on to our monthly water sales, which is report starts on page 72. Wanted to point out, we made a couple of changes to this report since last month. And if I could draw your attention down to the second half of the report, your imported barrier sales. Historically, we've showed this as just one bar, but we thought it prudent to break out the bar for the barrier sales into the Dominguez Gap side and to the West Coast barrier portion of it. So in this graph, you'll see in the lighter gray and green, that represents the sales of to the Dominguez Gap. And in the darker gray and the darker green are the sales to the West Coast barrier. As we noted earlier in our budget versus actual report, we did have a huge increase during the first quarter in our barrier injection to the West Coast barrier due to the Hyperion spill. And so those numbers do reflect that. The only other thing I'd point out on here is that for the month of October, we did have a positive variance in our barrier sales, and we had a slight negative variance in our retail sales. And then if we move to the following page, this is your recycled water sales for the month and for the year to date. Again, we talked about July through September earlier. Point out for the month of October, you'll see we did not achieve our budget and we are under last year's actual numbers as well. And that again is attributed to the Hyperion spill and the issues that we've had in trying to inject water into the barrier and to provide recycled water to our customers. One thing we did change on this report that I want to point out is we used to provide information on the desalter, but with the desalter not having any activity for this fiscal year, not anticipated. So at the bottom of this particular page, we decided to add a table. We hopefully it provides a little bit more information about our recycled water sales. So the top of this table highlights the if you will, the October month, but it looks at the barrier, it looks at the refineries and the disinfected tertiary customers. So it gives you a better look into what's happening in those particular areas. And below the month, the current month would be your year-to-date sales. So this was a change from last month, and I hope you find it helpful. So I'll stop there to see if there's any questions. All right, none. Shall we move on?
Please do.
Okay, so the last two pages of the monthly financial report are the director's conference and travel expense, as well as the following page is the executive management and staff travel expense. And that completes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
It's not. Thank you very much for a very complete report as usual.
Thank you.
And Chairman Deere, that concludes the information calendar today.
All right, we have no closed session.
No, we have no closed session items for today's meeting.
Did you say no items?
No closed session items, that's correct.
Okay, we'll go to director's comments. Director Williams, any comments?
No, thank you. Just happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you. Director Houston, comments? I guess not. Well, if there's no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Chairman Deere.
Whew, mercy.